Good day everyone, I am Blessed Hope Y Dorato, and for today's video, I will be discussing the continuation of the Lesson 4 Strategy 6, which is using case study as a teaching strategy. So when we say case study, it is also called as the case method of teaching or case-based pedagogy according to Kellen 2009, and it has three major components, which are the case itself, the student's preparation for engagement with and discussing the case, and the classroom discussion. So the lesson for the day will be the last two basic steps if you are using a case study to illustrate the application of theory in real-world context, which are the guiding the classroom discussion and summarizing and closure. In guiding the classroom discussion, the general principles for effective case discussion are the same as those for any whole classroom discussion. So, as a teacher, in guiding the classroom discussion, you have to initiate the discussion. So, you will be the one to speak up first. You will be the one to open the opportunity to speak, and you can also ask questions in order to initiate the discussion. And you can also keep the students focused on the main issues. So you should not let the students complicate the issues or the topic, no? So dapat wala nang paligoy-ligoy pa. And the third one is challenge the students to think deeply. So you have to encourage the students to have a higher order thinking skills. And the fourth one is help the students resolve conflict. So you have to help the students to resolve the problem of the study, and remind the students of the outcomes they are trying to achieve. So as a teacher, you have to facilitate the students to remind them by reminding them on the goals they have to attain or to achieve in solving the study or solving the case study. And last one, bring the discussion to a logical conclusion. So you have to carefully examine the results to determine what exactly they mean. So in guiding the classroom discussion, there are several particular points to note when the discussion is based on a case study. So we have introduction, discussion, and questioning. In introduction, the students will have to prepared for the discussion by reading the case materials and trying to answer the focus questions. So as a teachers, you do not have to spend a large amount of time setting the scene for the discussion. Since in introduction, you should aim to hook the reader's attention in the first few sentences by explaining in an interesting way the case you will be exploring. And take note that in introduction, it is important to remind the students briefly of how the case links to the main issues they are trying to study or they are studying and where it is leading them. So in discussion, this is the final parts of the case study in which the students will describe, analyze, and interpret their findings. So they will begin by briefly restating the case study problem they were investigating, diba? And this is not just sharing of ideas, nor it is a process of the students presenting ideas for your approval or for the teacher's approval. So in this part, the students must be deliberately involved in a joint effort to gain a deeper understanding of the issues embedded in the case. So, and as a teacher, you might need to remind the students of this point as they are trying to resolve the conflict or reach a discussion. So, a teacher or you as a teacher, you need to emphasize that the analysis of the case is a group task, and all the students should feel free to raise their questions or express their doubts. Okay, so and as a teacher, your job is to listen carefully to all contributions and encourage the students to elaborate and to justify or to clarify their contributions when necessary. And if you want to summarize the contributions by building up a map, or if you want to summarize the contributions, you can build up a mind map or flow chart on the board, but do not use the board to just passively record irrelevant parts, because in some cases it will be appropriate to augment the class discussion with short role plays that enable the students to engage them directly with the issues in the case study. So that's it for the discussion in the case study as a teaching strategy. The last point of to note when the discussion is based on the case study is the questioning. So take note that it is very important skill of a teacher during the discussion, because you have to you should ask open-ended questions. They make the discussion more interactive and interesting. Like for example, can you give a brief description of your study, something like that. So you as a teacher, your question should encourage the students to consider all the important issues in the case, but that doesn't mean that they should not give the students the impression that you are trying to give the discussion to your predetermined conclusion. So your questions might serve any of the following purposes. So we have clarification. For example, can you explain what you mean by that? For elaboration, can you expand on that idea? For generalization, in what other situations might that principle apply? For structuring, what facts need to be considered before we focus on the emotional issues? And if you want to ask questions through comparison, you can ask how is that different from based from their study. And for if you want to ask substantiation questions, you can ask how can we justly justify the assumptions. And for the linking, you can ask how do these two ideas relate to one another, since it is if you want to link two ideas. And for the engagement, what would you do in that situation? And if you want to ask integration based from their study, you can ask what general principles might help us understand these situations. And for the consensus, you can ask why might some people agree with that idea. And for the focus, you can ask how does that take us closer to a solution. So those are the questions you can ask in guiding the classroom discussion by using case study. So the last step of using a case study to illustrate application of theory in real world context is the summarizing and closure. So well-prepared cases will be so realistic that they cannot be resolved completely in a single class discussion. However, as a teacher, you still need to bring the discussion to a satisfying question. That is why you can provide the summary, or you might ask the students to do it either way. The summary should address both issues in case study and the process that were used to analyze it. So since in summarizing and closure, you have to create a lasting impression, like for example, correct the misunderstandings and emphasize the key information. So in summarizing and closure, you can take notes about the main idea and supporting points you think you should include in your summary. And you can make comments as specific as possible so that the students will think about what worked and did not work in their attempts to analyze the case study. See, since you're concluding your comments, since in concluding comments, it should help the students to see that the most important aspect of the whole exercise is their ability to provide a structured approach to the problem. And take note that a good conclusion will typically highlight points of agreement and unresolved issues, emphasize the need to interpret similar cases from a sound theoretical perspectives, and help the students to see that many real-world outcomes are determined by circumstance as much as by logic. So, ideally, your closure should end the discussion but not end the students thinking about the issues. So, that's it for summarizing and closure. So to summarize this lesson, guide the class discussion so that the students generate a list of questions that need to be answered before the problem in the case study can be resolved. And conclude the discussion with an overview of how these questions will be answered in subsequent lesson. So that's all for my report. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.